Hi, we're Nia and Marianne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon. Hello, Marianne.
Hi, Nia, and how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you? Are you good?
It's the most scintillating day here. But
Good.
before I go out there and enjoy it, I wanted to talk about eggs.
Oh, I do love an egg.
So do I. So we have a listener, and we said to our listeners, if there's anything you really want to talk about, we're here. So
Yes.
someone has emailed us and said, so how many eggs can you eat in a day?
Aha.
So this seemed like a dead simple question to me, and I suspect it seemed like a dead simple question to you. But until
Yes.
and then I started delving, and
And you
I
open
found there
Pandora's
was
box.
much confusion actually. Um, who needs listeners with tricky questions?
Well, quite. Okay, so let's put a little disclaimer in before we
Yes,
start.
let's do that.
So, we are obviously talking in an informal way. We're
Yep,
exploring interesting topics, and we're not giving medical advice.
yep.
So, um, this is what, and you'll understand maybe a little bit more why we
Mm,
say this as we go through. But if you've been given specific advice by your medical practitioner, then don't change anything without
yeah,
discussing it with them.
excellent.
Right. Okay. So, eggs, how many you can eat in a day? I think this is a great question.
Yep.
And to be honest, until somebody actually asked me this question, never even thought about it.
No.
But I presume that this is one of those ridiculous things that goes back many years and has some kind of context
Yeah.
that I'm just not aware of.
Perfect. So we'll start before you were born because that will be the context, although
Okie
you
dokes.
probably remember some of this because it's sort of the legacy goes on. But so if you had a client today, Nia, who said,
Yes.
how many eggs can I eat in a day, Nia? What just off the top of your head, how would you answer?
So this is a tricky question because
No,
there's
no. It's a
eggs.
simple question.
No, no, it's not. Because eggs are in a lot of things, right? So if you
Ah,
said, "Oh, I
yes.
have two boiled eggs for breakfast or two poached eggs or whatever,"
Yeah.
but then you also had food with eggs in it,
Mm, okay.
that's tricky.
So there so
Yeah.
that's the beginning of the complication that particularly nutritional research about anything, actually, not just eggs. The
Mm.
problem is you're not just eating eggs on a random controlled trial basis and somebody else in another group's not eating it. It's not
Mm.
that simple because you've always got these foodstuffs on the background of a diet. Okay. But let's go back a bit in terms of the sort of legacy,
Mm.
because once foods have got a bad name, this is sort of what happens, I think. So when I looked back, and I don't suppose you remember this, Nia, but there was a campaign in the UK about going to work on an egg. And this was after the war.
Mhm.
Eggs became more plentiful, and they were seen as an incredibly public health wise good form of protein.
Okay.
And when you look at the nutritional value of eggs, I mean, really, you can't fault them. I'm sorry for the vegans, but eggs are fantastically nutritious.
Yes.
So I'm sure vegans find other ways of getting these nutrients, but the egg is beautifully packed. It's almost a convenience food. It's
Yes.
non processed when you think about it. You really can't process eggs unless you buy egg whites in the bottles, which are pasteurized. But other than that, eggs are eggs.
Yep.
And they're densely nutritious, both in terms of macronutrients, so the bigger nutrients like
Mhm.
fats, proteins, and they also have a lot of micronutrients in. And the micronutrients are generally in the yolk of the egg. Now,
Yep.
there was a bit of a fad, wasn't there, where people ate egg white omelets
Oh,
and
egg
things
white
because
omelets.
because
See,
they thought that
the
the
yolk was bad for you.
cholesterol was in the
Yeah.
yolks, right? Do you
See,
remember
this is the
that?
thing though. That's just not very nice. It's so
No.
bland. Like, all the
I
taste
mean,
is
why
in the
would you?
yolk. Oh,
Exactly, the yellow. But even they even contain vitamin D. They contain some
yes.
nutrients that a lot of other things don't. They have almost all the amino acids that you need. So they're what you call almost a complete
Complete food.
food.
Yeah.
So if you were selling eggs to someone on a nutritional basis, that is just it's a
Gosh,
no-brainer.
marketer's
Eggs,
dream, aren't they, eggs? I mean,
yeah,
literally,
eggs
they
are
are
fantastic.
amazing.
Okay,
Okay.
right.
Right. Okay. So we had all these wonderful campaigns telling people to eat eggs. We know how
Yep,
wonderful they are, what they're
yep,
packed full of. So
yep.
how did it all go so wrong?
Right. So, we go back to old Ansel Keys and the
Well,
man
you do
who
love
started the
him.
fat thing. Yeah, that. Um, and to be fair to Ansel Keys, he did know at the time that it wasn't a straight business.
Okay.
But basically, in 1968 in America, they started this public health initiative to tell
Hmm.
people to lower the fats in their diet.
Hmm.
So, and we were talking about saturated fats, and there's lots of, differences. And eggs actually contain very little saturated fat. They're actually
Yes.
low in saturated fats, but they do contain cholesterol. And here's the problem.
Mm.
So, this message really, I mean, it took off. Almost the whole world started eating low fat, and the correlation between heart disease and saturated fat in diets was well established, so to speak.
Mm.
Um, Eggs were high in cholesterol, but nobody mentioned that they were low in saturates. So that's one of the things you need to understand, that cholesterol and saturated fats are completely different molecules. They're very different, and they have different pathways. Okay, so that's one of the problems. They got mixed up. I think that's
Right.
cholesterol
Okay.
and saturated fats got mixed
Got
up.
mixed up. Okay.
Not only that, when they undid those plaques in arteries and had a really good look at them, guess what was in them?
Cholesterol.
Apart from a few other things, but there was cholesterol in there. So,
Yeah.
wouldn't you then think that dietary cholesterol and the plaques in your arteries must be connected? I mean, that seems
Well,
like if you were a
seems
detective,
reasonable.
you'd be
Yeah.
saying, okay, there's a no brainer here
Yeah.
until you look at the DNA, and the DNA is slightly different. But in those days, it wasn't really the DNA. So, they put 2 and 2 together and they got 5. Um,
Right. And then
and
they
they
said,
started to be viewed as dangerous.
yeah. So then they said, oh, actually, we were totally wrong. Eggs aren't actually good for you. So
Yeah,
you can only
yeah,
have, I don't know, however many a day, they
yeah.
said.
So everybody got a bit twitchy about anything in a day, actually. And in the end,
Mm,
the advice was 3 eggs a week, particularly for people with
really?
heart disease.
Oh my goodness, I eat more than that.
Yeah. Well, you obviously didn't get that. You obviously
I
didn't
didn't
get
get
that
the message
memo.
in
No, you didn't get the
1968.
memo.
No.
But you can imagine doing research on the effect of eggs in the diet was also really difficult. Like all nutritional research, it's
Yeah.
really difficult because you've got to sift out the effect of eggs from the effect of that background diet. And remember, a lot of the initial research was done in America on the what they call the SAD diet, the standard American diet,
Mm.
which at the time was full of trans fats.
It really was
And
sad, wasn't it?
it was really sad. Also, trans fats, ultra processed foods, saturated fats, and sugar. So all those things were in that background diet.
Yeah.
So you can see the problem.
So
How
how
do
do
you
you know
tease
what's down
out
to
the
the
egg
egg and what's
effect?
down
Okay.
to the rest of the stuff? So
Yeah.
that's the problem, isn't it? We all of the egg kind of was
Mm.
a unwitting
Yeah.
bystander and got wrapped up in
Yeah.
everything else, which is
Exactly.
really sad.
Exactly. So eggs become vilified basically, and we still have this legacy all this time later. They
Mm,
do undo this eventually. There's a bit more to this as well. So cholesterol is obviously incredibly important
yes.
for use in your body, and most of the cholesterol you use in terms of cells and all the other functions is synthesized or made in the liver.
Yeah.
It's not.
And
It doesn't
yeah.
come from your diet. They talk about 85% of your cholesterol is made in your liver and 15% comes from your diet, but then there's
Yeah.
always a rider, and this is the problem.
But the thing
So
is that cholesterol is actually essential for life. If we didn't have
yeah,
cholesterol,
absolutely. If you didn't have, there are some genetic syndromes where people have problems with cholesterol synthesis, and it's not basically compatible
you
with
know,
life.
I is responsible for the production of steroids in your body, which
Yeah,
we
yeah,
need those, sex
yeah. Otherwise,
hormones
you
are
fall
steroids.
over.
So,
Mm,
people wouldn't go through puberty, wouldn't be able to reproduce, all of
yeah,
that,
yeah,
just one thing that cholesterol is so important for.
yeah. Exactly. Okay, so cholesterol is incredibly important. Um, but one of the real problems, I suppose, is we didn't know the difference between saturated fats and cholesterol. That was a real problem. Official advice did change actually about 20 years ago. The American Heart Foundation, or whatever they called, um, I think in 2010 they still said you should restrict eggs in your diet, and by
Mm,
2015 that clause had gone. But nobody
okay.
made much of a fanfare of it, and nobody said too much because it was almost as if, well, we made a bit of an error here, but we're not going to say too much, because what do you say
Mm.
to the general public about the fact that your nutritional advice might not have been quite right? The same as the low fat story, really.
And
Okay.
the other problem, I think, with all of that kind of stuff, which is once people um, put
Yeah.
that out into the world and say you can only eat this many eggs or you can only
Yeah.
eat
Yeah.
this much low, you got to be low fat, is that if somebody then completely changes with that advice and then suffers a heart attack or whatever, they
Yes.
don't want to be held
Yes.
liable for the fact that they got it.
No. You can
Yeah.
see how difficult it is. So 3 a week when I was practicing as a nurse in general practice, it was 3 a week for people who had heart disease or were diabetics or had high blood pressures or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
That changed to 6 a week. And I have no
Yeah.
idea where that number came from, but suddenly you could eat 6 a week.
Yeah.
And then they sort of lost the 6 a week, and it was, well, we don't really know the number. But
And then I suppose
what's
it depends what you eat your eggs with. So
yes,
if you're
yes.
having a full English,
Bacon, sausage,
lots of,
saturated
yeah,
fats,
trans
yes.
fats with your, but if you do all
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
and then have a
Yeah,
big piece of white bread toast, then
yeah.
obviously not a
All
healthy
of
thing.
that.
But if
Yeah.
you have,
And then orange juice as
yeah,
well.
and then,
Yeah,
well, obviously, yes. But
yeah,
then if you had two poached eggs on a slice of sourdough bread and a lot of
yeah,
salad and some kimchi and, all of that kind of
yeah.
stuff, that's actually really healthy. So
So
it does
there you
depend.
go. So this is the problem with research and in nutrition. It is a real problem because it is really complicated.
Yeah.
I started listening to a few podcasts, wished I hadn't then,
Hmm.
about eggs. There's not actually a huge amount of official stuff out there. And I can see
Mm.
why when I try to do this, because it is really hard to convey
Mm.
the right message. I listened to a well known research group podcast that was done about 3 months ago. So we're talking fairly up to date, and the nutritionist started off by saying eggs are wonderful, but like we are, and then saying two a day is fine, 1 to 2 a day. And then we lost the two as we went down the podcast, which was another interesting thing to me because that's
Yeah.
saying 50% less. And
Yeah.
then, which I thought was interesting. And then there's a rider saying, but in personalized nutrition, it might be that some people are super responders or absorb more cholesterol, or that it has, it's a complicated process
Yeah.
that it
So,
has
I
more
mean,
bearing on your cholesterol.
what
Yeah,
we said a few minutes ago, where we said that some people don't make cholesterol and then there's problems with that. Well,
yeah,
some people make too much cholesterol, and that's
exactly. So
just
you have
the
the
way their body works. So,
hypercholesterolemia. Yeah, yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
they
yeah.
have to be a little bit more
But
cautious.
but the question for me still in my mind was that if you are not really much influenced by your dietary cholesterol when it comes to serum cholesterol, then
Yes.
it doesn't
Doesn't
matter whether
matter.
you
No.
yeah, and that's what sort of got me puzzled to the point where I thought I just can't work this out. I can't work out what the actual message is here. And I almost
Mm,
found myself back in the
back in the
box
same.
I started
Yeah.
in. So if you look on, I don't know, Twitter, and you look at cardiologists' advice, I went all over looking.
Mm,
There's often riders saying, but for some people. So I
Yeah.
think this is where we're at. Eggs are brilliant nutritionally. I
Yes.
realize some people don't eat them for, animal welfare
Reasons. Yes.
things, yeah, reasons, and that's fine. But they are fantastically cheap, easy protein.
Mhm.
And you might want to buy the best eggs you can, but that's an ecological thing and about animal welfare
Mm.
rather than about the nutritional status of eggs.
Mm.
So eggs are a wonderful bit of your diet. You don't have to count them.
Nope.
If you are eating a whole food diet and eggs are part of that diet, you really don't have to worry about any sort of restriction. The problem comes if you're
Mhm.
eating a lot of saturated fats, ultra processed food,
Yeah.
and that your background diet isn't great. You're then adding eggs to that sort of mix.
Yeah.
So I suppose the rider is eggs are great. Don't restrict them as long as you eat well.
Yeah.
But I'd be more cautious about saturated fats.
Fact than anything
So it
else.
might
Yeah.
be that if you're looking at any sort of balance here, I'd be more careful with the amount of saturated fats you're
Yeah.
eating.
Yeah. Absolutely. But one of the things about eggs is they are delicious, they are versatile, they can be used for things. But I
Mm,
think it's incredibly difficult to eat too many
more,
because
yeah.
they
The
they are so filling.
filling,
If you have a couple of eggs, I mean, one of my favourite things to do with eggs is to make that shakshuka. Can't
yeah, yeah,
pronounce it, which is
yeah.
just so
That,
lovely
yeah,
because it's all
lovely.
full of, and
Or
you just have a
Turkish
couple of eggs
eggs,
in there,
yeah,
and then if you have that for your breakfast, you probably won't even feel like lunch, or if you do, it'll be a long
yeah.
time later because they're so filling.
And there's lots of good research to back that up. So they did
Yeah.
a bagel thing study where,
Oh yeah.
people had bagels and then they had bagels with an egg on, and the people that had the egg on the bagel lasted an awful lot longer in terms of
Then the
hunger.
bagel
So there's
people.
lots of good evidence that eggs add huge value to your diet.
Mm. Mm.
But the question mark is much more around saturated fats. But even then, the complications come because there's so many factors that affect your chronic disease profile,
Mm.
um, and your risks, and as an individual, that you might have susceptibilities
Abilities
to
to other
various
things. But
things.
yeah.
Yeah,
But so we should take the little devil horns off the egg. He's not as bad
yeah, I
as you
think
think he
so.
is.
I think so. And but
Yeah.
you need to discuss things if you have actually been told to restrict eggs in your own diet. This is
Yeah.
not official medical advice.
Obviously.
Okay.
Lovely. Thanks,
Thanks
Marianne.
for that great question, listener. Hope they don't come up with any more.
No, do come up with as many as you want. We love questions. I think that's really important.
Yeah, it is. It is. But they do ask the questions that we ask ourselves, but sometimes forget to answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. See you next
See
week.
you next week. Bye for
Bye.
now.